On August 12, 2015, 24-year-old Amy Davis and her husband Ray went on a multi-day hike in Yellowstone National Park. They were supposed to return to their car in 5 days, but disappeared without leaving a single clue. Exactly 1 year has passed. 20 Me emerged from the woods alone, exhausted, with numerous scars and clear marks from metal chains on her legs. However, the worst thing happened in the investigator's office. When the woman was shown her wedding photos with her husband Ray, she calmly stated that she had never seen this man before. Who really held Amy, where she really was, and what secret this perfect couple was hiding? You will find out in this video. Enjoy it. Some names and details in this story have been changed for anonymity and confidentiality. Not all photographs are from the actual scene. On August 12, 2015, at 9:30 in the morning, a silver Ford SUV belonging to the Davis family crossed the eastern gate of Yellowstone National Park. 25-year-old Ray Davis was driving, and his wife, 24-year-old Amy, was in the passenger seat. The couple left Cody, Wyoming, planning to spend 5 days in complete isolation from civilization. According to Park Service records, the couple checked in at the Canyon Village Visitor Center at exactly 10:15 that morning. Ray Davis filled out the registration card with his own hand, specifying Pelican Valley as the hike's destination, one of the wildest and most unpredictable sections of the park where there are no officially marked trails and any cell phone service is lost after 2 miles from the trailhead. Pelican Valley is known among experienced hikers for its oppressive atmosphere and specific dangers. This is the area with the highest concentration of grizzly bears in all of Wyoming, cut by deep thermal faults from which the choking smell of sulfur constantly rises. The forest here consists mainly of dense stands of twisted broadleaf pine, where the trees are so dense that they create twilight even at noon. According to the ranger on duty who gave the couple their permit, Amy and Ray looked calm and well prepared. They both had navy blue professional backpacks, trekking poles, and cans of bear spray attached to their belts. The ranger later noted in his report that the couple had inquired about the status of the Pelican Creek crossing, as the water level could rise several feet after the summer rains. Amy and Ray's history together spanned more than a decade. They started dating in high school in Cody and had been officially married for 3 years at the time of the trip. Among their close friends, they were called the perfect couple, whose relationship was a model of stability and mutual trust. Amy's parents later described Ray as an extremely responsible person who would never risk his wife's life for the sake of extra impressions. It was Ray's reputation that made the family react instantly when, on August 17, 2015, the couple did not get in touch at 20 o'clock in the evening as previously agreed. At exactly 9:45 in the morning of August 18, a group of rangers found the Davis' SUV in a parking lot near the trailhead. The car was locked, with no signs of forced entry or break-in. Inside, on the back seat, there was a printed map of the trail with Ray's notes and Amy's sunglasses. There were no signs of a hasty departure, confirming that the couple had gone into the forest as planned. However, the first hours of the search revealed a strange anomaly. The search dogs assigned to the operation lost the trail only 300 yards from the parking lot, near an old fallen cedar tree locals call Black Ford. Over the next 10 days, Yellowstone National Park became the center of one of the largest search operations of the Decade 18 professional park rangers. 54 volunteers from the Wyoming Search and Rescue Organization and 6 canine teams with bloodhound dogs joined the search. The search teams formed chains stretching 2 miles wide, methodically combing every foot of the Pelican Creek shoreline and the bottom of the deep canyons near Mirror Plateau. Twice a day, a helicopter equipped with advanced thermal imagers took to the air. According to the pilot, the dense forest and vapors from the hot springs created blind spots where scanning the ground was almost impossible. Volunteers working on the ground noted the eerie silence that prevailed in Pelican Valley. One searcher later mentioned in a report that he had not heard a single bird singing or animal rustling in 3 days. On the 8th day of the operation, the coordinators focused on the thermal fissure area, a symbolic place that the rangers called Hell's Gate because of the constant steam emissions and the fragile soil that could collapse under a person's weight. Despite a thorough inspection, no clues were found. No abandoned equipment, no remnants of a campfire, not even a torn package of dry rations. The lack of material evidence of the pair's stay within 15 miles of the starting point confused professional trackers. Usually, travelers leave at least minimal traces: crushed grass, broken branches, or shoe prints on the wet riverbank. By the end of August 2015, the resources of volunteer organizations were completely exhausted. Amy and Ray's parents, who were in the search area every day, were forced to accept the official conclusion of the park management. Given the high density of predators and the difficult terrain with hidden thermal pits, the main working version was a bear attack or a tragic accident that made it impossible to send a signal for help. On September 1, 2015, the active phase of the search was officially closed. The names of Amy and Ray Davis joined the list of those whom Yellowstone took into its eternal silence, leaving descendants with no answer to the question of what exactly happened in the depths of Pelican Valley. Exactly 12 months have passed since Amy and Ray Davis last checked in at the Yellowstone National Park logbook. The search operation had long since been discontinued, and their case had been relegated to the category of those that eventually gathered dust in the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office archives. However, the nature of the park, with its constant movement of the Earth's crust and hydrothermal activity, was preparing its own solution. On August 15, 2016, at 11:45 in the morning, a scientific team led by Dr. Arthur Manning conducted routine spectral monitoring of the most remote areas of the park. Their target was the Mirror Plateau, an isolated area at an elevation of over 9,000 feet, located 20 miles from the nearest paved road. This place resembles the setting for a movie about another planet. The ground here is constantly breathing hot steam, and the air is saturated with the acrid smell of hydrogen sulfide. Due to the high acidity of the soil and constant gas emissions, there is virtually no vegetation in the area, with only a few skeletons of long-dead trees rising above the whitish surface. Scientists were using thermal imaging drones to record temperature anomalies in the thermal pools when one of the sensors detected a foreign object in the center of a shallow pool that resembled pale turquoise in color. According to the testimony of one of the laboratory technicians, which was later included in the official report, the object was located in an area that local rangers call the Sulfur Cauldron. This is a small but extremely aggressive hydrothermal spring with water temperatures often exceeding 200 degrees Fahrenheit. As the group approached the edge of the pool using special protective suits, they discovered partially exposed human remains. The skeleton was in water with a high content of sulfur and sulfuric acid, which paradoxically accelerated the decomposition of soft tissue but preserved the bones in an unusual state. The process of lifting the remains lasted more than 6 hours. The difficulty was that the ground around the pool was extremely unstable, and the toxic fumes required the use of oxygen masks. No clothing or professional equipment was found at the site. According to the report of the scene inspection, not a single clue was found within a 5-mile radius around the Sulfur Cauldron that would indicate the presence of a second person, Amy Davis. Her backpack, sleeping bag, or even tent seemed to have dissolved in the thin air of the plateau. The results of a forensic examination conducted in a Wyoming laboratory 3 days later were stunning. Identification. By comparing dental records, it was officially confirmed that the remains belonged to 25-year-old Ray Davis. The condition of the bones, chemical analysis confirmed a long stay in an acidic environment, but the skeletal structure remained intact. Fatal injury. A clear 4-inch long crack was found on the back of the skull. The nature of the bone damage left no room for doubt. The pathologist concluded that this deformation could only have been caused by a powerful blow from a blunt object, such as a heavy stone or metal tool. The blow was inflicted from behind with such force that death must have occurred instantly. The rest of the skeleton showed no signs of a fall from a height, limb fractures, or injuries typical of an attack by a large predator such as a grizzly bear or wolf. The skeleton was lying in the pool in an unnatural position, indicating that the body had been placed there after death. The discovery radically changed the status of the case. The National Park Service Special Investigations Unit, together with the county sheriff, officially reclassified the incident from a missing person to a premeditated murder. The Pelican Valley, previously thought to be the scene of an accident, now looked like a perfectly chosen scene for a crime. Investigators drew attention to a symbolic detail of the body's location. The Mirror Plateau got its name because at certain hours of the day, the glare from the thermal zones creates the illusion of a mirror-like surface. However, instead of reflecting reality, this place hid an act of violence for a year. According to the reconstruction of events based on the last entry in the logbook, Ray Davis had no reason to deviate from the route towards the plateau, which was 15 miles from the planned Pelican Valley Trail. The situation of Amy Davis's disappearance became even more mysterious. The absence of her remains next to her husband gave faint hope that she might have survived, or indicated that she was victimized elsewhere. A police officer who participated in the re-examination of Mirror Plateau noted in a conversation with witnesses that the forest in the area looked dead, and that every new step in the area only added to the questions. At the end of August 2016, the case was transferred to federal authorities for a deeper investigation. Investigators began a thorough check of everyone who might have been within a 20-mile radius of Pelican Valley last August, trying to find at least one living soul who saw the perfect match before one of them was left forever in the sulfur cauldron. The discovery of Ray Davies' remains in a thermal pool on the Mirror Plateau instantly changed the vector of the investigation. Now the county sheriff's detectives and federal agents were dealing not with a disappearance, but with a premeditated murder, where the way the body was hidden indicated detailed knowledge of the area, or the random brutality of someone who felt at home in the Yellowstone forests. The investigation team's first priority was to work out the theory of an outside aggressor, a person who could have met the couple in a remote location, who could have met the couple on a remote trail in Pelican Valley and killed them. The focus was on all persons who had access to the park in August 2015 and had a dubious reputation. During a thorough analysis of entry logs and lists of seasonal staff, the name of Silas Thorne surfaced. The 42-year-old man worked as a handyman at technical facilities near the park's east gate. According to a police file, Thorne had a 6-year sentence in a Wyoming state prison for assault with serious bodily injury and illegal possession of a weapon. He was described as a reclusive person and prone to outbursts of uncontrollable aggression. His co-workers said in their testimony that Silas often disappeared into the woods for days at a time, calling it self-hunting, although he never had a license to do so. The key piece of evidence that led the investigation to focus on Thorne was the testimony of a local tourist, Jacob Miller. During a second interrogation in August 2016, Miller recalled that on August 13, 2015, at approximately 4 o'clock in the morning, he saw an old blue Dodge pickup truck on one of the forest roads leading away from the main Pelican Valley Trail. The vehicle was traveling without its headlights on, which looked extremely suspicious for such an early hour. The description of the pickup truck matched the vehicle owned by Silas Thorne. On August 28, 2016, at 6 o'clock in the morning, a SWAT team backed by federal agents blockaded Thorne's temporary home, a rusted trailer located in the middle of the woods near Silvertip Creek. The place looked abandoned, with empty metal cans and the remains of old car tires lying around the trailer. The air was saturated with the smell of damp earth and cheap fuel. During his arrest, Thorne did not resist, but his behavior was recorded in the report as demonstratively indifferent. He refused to answer any questions without a lawyer present. The search inside the trailer lasted more than 10 hours. Criminalists methodically examined every square inch of the cramped space. As a result, they seized 2 hunting knives with steel blades 6 inches long, a pair of work boots with the remains of dry dirt, which was later sent for geological analysis, a flannel checked shirt with dark brown spots on the sleeves and collar that looked like baked blood. For the investigators, it looked like a long-awaited breakthrough. Spectral analysis of the stains on the clothes was to be the link that would connect Thorne to the crime scene on the Mirror Plateau. At the same time, trace evidence analysts were examining the tire treads of his blue pickup truck, trying to find a match to tracks that might have survived in the Pelican Valley area, although after a year of rainfall, this was almost impossible. However, 4 days later, the DNA results came back from the lab, which was a cold shower for the entire investigation team. The biological material found on Silas Thorne's knives and shirt had nothing to do with humans. It was the blood of a wapiti deer. Thorne, who eventually agreed to testify on the record, said that in mid-August 2015, he was indeed engaged in illegal fishing, but he did so 8 miles from where the Davises disappeared. The next blow to the prosecution's case came from a verified alibi. Thorne's lawyer provided records from a construction site in Cody, where Silas worked part-time in his spare time at the park. According to his timesheets on August 12 and 14, 2015, he was on shift from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening. The distance from Cody to Pelican Valley is more than 50 miles on a difficult mountain road, which made it physically impossible for him to be at the crime scene during critical hours, unless he had the ability to be in 2 places at once. The detectives found themselves in what the reports call a dead-end investigation. Silas Thorne, who was ideally suited to the role of the killer because of his character and past, turned out to be just a petty poacher who happened to be on the police's radar. All the seized evidence was returned to the owner, and the case had to be reviewed from the very beginning. The most frightening thing about this situation was that the fate of Amy Davis was still unknown. If Ray was dead and Thorne was innocent, who exactly made the young woman disappear without a trace, leaving no material imprint on the park's grounds? At a brief press briefing on September 1, 2016, a sheriff's spokesman said that the investigation was looking into other leads, but refused to specify which ones. The atmosphere in Cody and around Yellowstone was becoming increasingly tense. Locals began to talk about a shadow in the woods that even the country's best agents could not catch. The Ray Davies case was up in the air, and the search for Amy became a mere formality for many, until 3 days later, when the nighttime silence near one of the park's gas stations was broken by the appearance of a man who had been dead for a year. On August 24, 2016, the night over the Yellowstone National Park was unusually cold and windless. At 3 o'clock in the morning, 20-year-old operator Thomas Lang was on duty at the Rim Fell Canyon gas station, located near the northern exit of the park. According to his words, recorded in the official police report, the night passed quietly until the automatic glass doors of the gas station store opened, letting a figure inside that looked more like a ghost than a living person. The woman who crossed the threshold under the bright light of fluorescent lamps moved slowly, almost never taking her feet off the floor. Lang later recalled in a conversation with detectives that the first thing he noticed was the sound, a barely audible scraping and heavy, raspy breathing. The woman was dressed in rags that had once been hiking clothes. The only thing left of her dark blue storm jacket were the dirty shreds hanging from her thin shoulders. Her skin had an unnatural waxy tint, and her hair was so tangled it resembled dry moss. The operator immediately called the emergency service 911, reporting the sighting of the emaciated woman. While the patrol car and paramedics were on their way, she didn't say a word, just greedily drank water from the bottle Thomas handed her, her hands shaking so badly that water spilled onto her chest. When Police Sergeant Mark Weber arrived on the scene 15 minutes later, he immediately recognized the woman as Amy Davis, whose picture had been on every bulletin board in Wyoming for a year. However, the woman sitting on the floor of the gas station bore little resemblance to the smile from her wedding photos. Amy was rushed to West Park Hospital in Cody. A medical examination conducted by a team of doctors on duty at 5:30 in the morning revealed the patient's critical condition. According to Amy Davis's medical records, at the time of hospitalization, her weight was 92 pounds, which was almost half of her pre-disappearance weight. Her level of dehydration and vitamin deficiency indicated prolonged malnutrition. Her body temperature was low to 94 degrees Fahrenheit. Particular attention of medical and police forensic experts was drawn to the injuries. On Amy's back, there were numerous scars, deep, healed scars that crossed the skin in different directions, like marks from systematic blows. On the ankles of both feet, doctors found specific ring-shaped bruises and skin worn down to the meat, characteristic signs of prolonged wearing of metal chains. This evidence left no doubt that Amy was not just lost in the woods, but was being held captive under tight control. The Federal Bureau of Investigation detectives who joined the case a few hours later could not begin formal interrogation. Immediately, Amy was in a state of deep psychological shock and dissociative numbness. She reacted only to sharp sounds or suddenly turning on the light, shuddering all over. The psychiatrist who examined her in room 312 noted in his report that the patient was showing signs of sensory deprivation, a condition that occurs after prolonged exposure to complete darkness and isolation from the outside world. 2 days later, on August 26, 2016, Amy's condition stabilized enough for Detectives Vines and Lawson to ask her the first questions. The police acted cautiously, trying to reconstruct the chain of events of that fateful August of last year. However, the woman's first reaction threw the investigation into a state of absolute confusion. When Detective Wines laid out Amy and Ray's wedding photos from 3 years ago on the hospital table, she looked at the pictures calmly, almost mechanically. Not a muscle in her face flinched. The room was dead silent, broken only by the monotonous beeping of the medical monitor. According to the audio recording of the interrogation, Amy Davis said in a flat, emotionless voice, "I don't know who this is. I've never seen this man before." When detectives tried to explain to her that it was her husband Ray, with whom she had gone camping, Amy shook her head in denial. She claimed that her life began in the basement, a dark, cold room with concrete walls where she was completely alone, chained to a metal beam. According to her, an unknown man, whose face she never saw because of the constant darkness and the bag he put over her head, brought her food and water once a day. She did not remember her past in the city of Cody, her wedding, or the events of August 12, 2015. In her mind, there was only the kidnapper and months of pain and isolation. This version seemed logical given the chain marks on her feet, but the complete lack of recognition of Ray, whose body had already been found 15 miles away, aroused professional suspicion among the detectives. Whether it was a real amnesia caused by trauma or a skillfully played-out performance, no one had an answer to this question at the time. Amy's parents were summoned to the hospital. Their meeting with their daughter was recorded by a surveillance camera in the corridor. Amy recognized her mother, but their embrace seemed one-sided. The woman stood motionless, as if her body was still shackled by the same invisible chains. While the press outside the hospital was building theories about the Yellowstone maniac, detectives began to wonder if Amy was really held captive by an unknown man. Why did he decide to release her now, a year after her husband's murder? And why did her body show no other biological traces of the perpetrator, except for the scars that had already become part of her new, distorted reality? While Amy Davis was under round-the-clock surveillance in a closed wing of West Park Hospital, the investigative team focused its efforts on studying the personal life of the couple who had been considered exemplary for a year. Amy's claim that she had never seen her husband was initially perceived as a consequence of severe psychological trauma or amnesia. However, for the experienced Federal Bureau of Investigation detectives who joined the case after Ray Davis's body was discovered, this statement signaled a thorough check of the couple's digital past. On August 28, 2016, computer forensics specialists gained access to Ray's personal devices found in his office in his home in Cody, as well as his cloud storage accounts. What the analysts discovered when they examined Ray's laptop hard drive and smartphone backups radically changed the image of the perfect man. An encrypted folder hidden under the guise of operating system files revealed professional-grade spyware. According to a technical expert's report, the program had been secretly installed on Amy's cell phone 2 years before she disappeared. The functionality of the software was impressive. Every 15 minutes, Amy's device, unnoticed by the owner, transmitted the exact geographical coordinates of her location to a server that only Ray had access to. Moreover, the program automatically duplicated all incoming and outgoing text messages, emails, and even made short audio recordings of background noise when the phone was in standby mode. Detective Lawson, who studied these logs, later noted in his notes that Ray Davies had created an invisible digital cage around his wife. Every move she made, from a visit to a grocery store 3 miles away to a brief meeting with a friend at a coffee shop, was recorded and analyzed. This was not a concern for safety. It was maniacal control that left Amy no chance for personal space. But the real horror awaited investigators when they searched their shared home in Cody, Wyoming. The Davis house looked perfect from the outside: a neat lawn, a light beige bark painted facade, and large windows overlooking the mountains. But inside, behind the perfect interior, was an extensive covert surveillance system. During a detailed inspection of the bedroom, kitchen, and even the bathroom, forensic experts found 8 miniature cameras disguised as smoke detectors, wall clocks, and decorative elements. All the recordings from these cameras were automatically uploaded to a remote cloud storage, which was accessed through a multi-level password system. When on August 30, 2016, the detectives began to review the video archive dating back to the first half of 2015, the atmosphere in the investigation department became depressing. The video recordings, which totaled more than 400 hours, showed systematic physical and psychological abuse. The scenes the investigators saw completely refuted the stories of friends and relatives about the couple's unearthly love. The video clearly showed Ray Davies demanding detailed reports from his wife for every minute of her time. The slightest inconsistency in Amy's story led to outbursts of rage. In one episode, recorded 3 weeks before the trip to Yellowstone, Ray kept Amy in the kitchen for 2 hours, forcing her to kneel on the cold tiles just for being 10 minutes late for work. In another recording, he was seen using force, grabbing her by the hair and pushing her against the wall, while his voice remained calm, which only added to the eeriness of the situation. Amy looked intimidated in these videos, offering little resistance, as if her will had been completely broken by years of such treatment. The analysis of digital evidence allowed the investigation to reconstruct a true picture of life in the Davis home. Financial control. Amy did not have access to her own bank accounts. Ray gave her only $20 a day for personal expenses. Social isolation. In the 6 months prior to her disappearance, Amy had stopped communicating with all of her friends, and her phone calls with her mother were only with her husband present. Psychological pressure. Files with names corresponding to the dates of the month were found on Ray's computer, where he described in detail Amy's mistakes and the punishments she was given. A symbolic detail that amazed even experienced forensic scientists was the discovery in Ray's office. In his desk drawer was a large photo album covered in expensive leather. On the first page was an inscription: "Our perfect life." The album was filled with pictures from their travels where they both looked incredibly happy against the backdrop of mountain lakes and forests. However, digital data analysis revealed that some of these photos were taken only hours after hidden cameras recorded acts of violence in their home. It was an elaborate fake designed for the outside world. A police spokesman at a closed-door meeting on August 31, 2016, said that the perfect couple version of Ray Davies is officially dead. Ray Davies was not a victim trying to save his wife from an unknown kidnapper. He was a tyrant who created a personal hell for her. This discovery forced the detectives to take a fresh look at Amy herself. If she really didn't recognize her husband in the wedding photos, was it memory loss, or had her subconscious simply erased the source of her years of horror? The main question remained, however. How could this frail, terrified woman have survived a year in the wild or in captivity if her master and overseer had been killed by a blow to the head at the very beginning of their journey? Each new report from the laboratory only added depth to this dark case, turning the story of the disappearance into a complex anatomy of domestic terror, where the line between victim and executioner became increasingly blurred. On September 4, 2016, the investigation into Amy Davis received the first results of an in-depth forensic examination, which forced detectives to reconsider the woman's status as an accidental kidnapping victim. While Amy was recovering in an isolated ward at West Park Hospital, a team of trauma experts and pathologists worked on a detailed analysis of the scars on her body. At first glance, the numerous scars on her back and shoulders seemed to be the result of brutal torture by an unknown maniac. However, careful examination under special spectral lighting revealed anomalies that did not fit the picture of chaotic violence. According to Dr. Elizabeth Grant's findings, the burns on Amy's skin had an unnaturally clear geometry. Instead of the torn edges characteristic of whiplash or random torture, the scars formed parallel lines and regular angles. The report noted that such injuries could only be inflicted if the object was completely immobile and a methodical use of a hot metal object with a clearly defined shape. However, the key discovery was the angle of the injuries. The trace evidence showed that the direction and depth of the burns on Amy's back perfectly matched the trajectory of the hand of a person who inflicts injuries on themselves while looking at a mirror image. This hypothesis indicated that most of the torture described by the woman could have been the result of planned self-injury. Simultaneously with the medical examinations, a group of rangers was recombing the park within a 10-mile radius of the location of Ray Davis's body. On September 7, 2016, at 14 hours and 30 minutes, the search team discovered the entrance to an abandoned adit near Sulphur Springs. The site was located in a deep canyon where the air was heavy with sulfur fumes and the walls of the adit were covered with a yellowish damp coating. The entrance was camouflaged by old boards and dead wood, making it virtually invisible to a casual tourist. Inside the adit, at a depth of 25 feet from the entrance, the detectives found a cache that looked more like a prepared warehouse for long-term survival. In a dry corner, protected from groundwater by a plastic covering, were 48 cans of canned stewed beef and vegetables, 24 bottles of purified water, each with a volume of 32 ounces, a set of basic antibiotics and painkillers, and several packages of dry alcohol for starting a fire. Forensic scientists who arrived at the scene conducted a detailed seizure of the evidence. A clear right thumbprint was found on one of the sealed packages of medical bandages. Comparative analysis in the FBI database confirmed that the print belonged to Amy Davis. However, the most shocking fact was the production dates of the found food and medicines. According to the labeling on the canned goods and the serial numbers on the medications, most of the goods were purchased at various stores in Wyoming between January and March of 2015. This meant that the stash in Sulphur Springs was formed 6 months before Amy and Ray Davis officially set out on their fatal trip. According to one of the agents who took part in the inspection of the adit, the place looked like a perfectly prepared staging area. There were no signs of an intruder or kidnapper, but evidence of a woman's long stay was found. Several women's hair clips and an old magazine with pages read to the holes. Given the absence of any signs of a struggle inside, the investigation began to lean toward the version that Amy Davis was not the victim of an unknown perpetrator. The anatomy of the manipulation was becoming more and more apparent. Every detail, from the choice of a remote adit with natural camouflage to the self-inflicted scars, indicated that the events of August 2015 were part of a complex, premeditated scenario. The scar on Ray Davies' skull now looked not like an accidental blow from a maniac, but like the first act in a plan to free himself from a domestic tyrant, where Amy was both the director and the main character. The detectives realized that the woman who claimed not to remember her name was actually in control of every second of her kidnapping, using the harsh nature of Yellowstone as the most reliable accomplice in her desire to disappear for one world and be reborn in another. Further interrogations had to take on a completely different tone as the evidence from the Sulphur Springs adit destroyed the last line of defense for her fictional story. On September 10, 2016, at 11:30 in the morning, in room 402 at West Park Hospital, the decisive interrogation began that would forever change the course of the Davis investigation. In the room, in addition to Amy and her lawyer, were Detectives Vines and Lawson, as well as an FBI psychologist. The air in the room was sterile and tense. According to audio recording number 42-B, Detective Vines began the conversation not with questions, but with a demonstration of physical evidence. He laid out photos from the mine shaft near Sulphur Springs in front of Amy, sealed packages with her fingerprints on them, food supplies dating back to the early part of 2015, and the trace evidence of the mirror origin of her scars. For 12 minutes, the office was completely silent. Amy Davis stared at the photographs with no expression on her face, but her breathing, detected by medical sensors, became more rapid. When Detective Lawson explicitly pointed out that the version of an unknown kidnapper was completely refuted by the findings in the adit, the woman's behavior changed dramatically. She stopped playing the role of a victim with amnesia, straightened her back, and for the first time in her life, looked the detectives directly in the eye. According to the protocol, her voice became firm and devoid of the trembling that had been observed earlier. Amy began her testimony with a confession that is recorded in the official transcript. "I knew this moment would come. Yellowstone is a big place, but it can't keep secrets forever." She explained in detail that the plan to kill Ray Davies had begun to take shape in her mind 6 months before the trip. The reason was not a sudden rage, but years of systematic torture and total control, which the investigation already knew about from Ray's digital archives. Amy admitted that he had repeatedly threatened her with death. "He said that if I tried to leave, he would find me even underground, so I decided that he should be underground." Amy's reconstruction of the events of August 12, 2015 was as follows. As they moved 7 miles into Pelican Valley from the starting point, the atmosphere between the couple became critical. Near the bed of Pelican Creek, where the current was particularly swift, Ray again used force because Amy was allegedly moving slowly. When he bent down to the water to fetch a canteen, Amy used a pre-prepared rock weighing about 5 pounds that she carried discreetly in a side pocket of her backpack. One precise blow to the back of the skull proved fatal. Amy's confession revealed the gruesome details of her subsequent actions. She did not run away. She methodically implemented her plan for a year-long performance. Using the knowledge of hydrothermal zones she had learned in her training, Amy dragged her husband's body over 3 miles to the sulfur cauldron on the Mirror Plateau. She knew that the high acidity of the water would accelerate the decomposition of soft tissue and destroy any biological traces of herself. She then went to her secret hiding place in an adit near Sulphur Springs. The most striking part of the confession was the story of how she spent that year. Amy voluntarily isolated herself in the darkness of the adit, coming to the surface only at night to avoid being seen by rangers or drones. She inflicted burns on herself with a hot metal rod, focusing on the reflection in a small pocket mirror to create the image of a victim of prolonged torture. She trained her gaze, her gait, and even her future memory loss. "Every scar on my back was the price of my freedom," one of the agents present at the interrogation quoted her as saying. She explained that she chose August 24, 2016 as the date of her return because she knew that the anniversary of her disappearance had already passed and that there would be no active search in the area. Amy was counting on the fact that her emaciated appearance and horrific scars would evoke such strong empathy from the public and the police that no one would suspect her of killing the perfect man. However, she underestimated the digital traces Ray left in the cloud and the professionalism of the trace evidence experts who were able to distinguish between the hand of the tormentor and the victim's own. At the end of the interrogation, which lasted more than 4 hours, Amy Davis signed a full confession to second-degree murder. She looked calm, as if a weight heavier than the boulders she had used to mask the entrance to her Edite had been lifted from her shoulders. Detective Lawson later noted in his report that it was the coldest confession he had ever made. The woman expressed no regret for her husband's death, only mild disappointment that her perfect scenario had not withstood the facts. The case, which began as a mysterious disappearance in the Yellowstone forests, was finally transformed into a story about the brutal, mathematically calculated revenge of a woman who decided to direct her own liberation. The trial of Amy Davis began on February 15, 2017, in the Cody District Court. The case instantly gained high-profile status, dividing public opinion into two irreconcilable camps. On one side of the courtroom stood the prosecution, which insisted that Amy's actions were an example of cold-blooded, mathematically calculated first-degree murder. The prosecutor repeatedly drew the jury's attention to the evidence. He argued that the 6 months of preparation, the purchase of 48 cans of canned food, and the methodical self-mutilation were not evidence of desperation, but of the malice of a person who decided to execute her husband without trial. On the other side of the courtroom was the defense team, which chose a strategy based on the concept of prolonged self-defense. Amy's lawyers presented to the court the results of the analysis of Ray Davies's digital devices, which had previously shocked the investigation. During 12 days of hearings, the jury was shown fragments from more than 400 hours of archival recordings of hidden cameras. These images showed how the perfect man turned into a monster within the walls of his own home. Psychological experts called by the defense testified that Amy was in a state of constant life threat. According to them, the digital cage Ray created with the help of spyware left the woman no chance of escape through law enforcement. A symbolic moment of the trial was the speech of forensic psychiatrist Dr. Stephen Green. He explained to the jury the phenomenon of battered woman syndrome, noting that for Amy, killing her husband in the wild was the only way to physically survive. When your every move is monitored by satellite and your every word is recorded, you stop believing in civilized rescue, Dr. Green said. He argued that creating a hideout in Yellowstone was not an act of aggression for her, but the construction of the only safe place on the planet where her husband's digital tentacles could not reach. However, the prosecution did not back down, focusing on the ethical aspect of the performance. The prosecutor emphasized that Amy had been deliberately misleading hundreds of volunteers for a year, who spent thousands of hours searching for her, risking their lives in dangerous areas of the park. He demanded the maximum penalty of 25 years in prison, pointing out that self-mutilation and staging a kidnapping are a manifestation of sociopathic traits. On March 20, 2017, at 14 hours and 30 minutes, Judge Robert Miller announced the verdict. The court found Amy Davis guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but took into account extraordinary mitigating circumstances. The text of the verdict stated that systematic domestic violence and total control by Ray Davis created conditions under which the defendant acted in a state of extreme necessity. Amy received a 5-year suspended sentence with no real time behind bars. The judge also ordered her to undergo a 2-year course of intensive psychological rehabilitation. After the verdict was announced, Amy Davis appeared only once in front of journalists' cameras. She looked calm, but her eyes, as reporters noted, remained cold. She did not utter a single word of remorse. Within a week after the trial, Amy began the process of completely annihilating her former life. She officially changed her name and surname, obtained new documents, and disappeared from Cody without a trace. The last time she was seen was at the north entrance to Yellowstone Park, where she left flowers at a memorial plaque, not in honor of her husband, but in memory of the woman she had been before August 12, 2015. The case of Amy and Ray Davies remained in the FBI archives as a cautionary tale about the fact that the blackest secrets are often hidden behind a perfect facade. This story was put to a final end. The woman who claimed during interrogations that she did not know the man from her wedding photos finally realized her wish to the end. She erased Ray Davies from reality, first physically with a heavy stone near Pelican Creek, and then legally by changing her identity and disappearing into the mists of the American forests Yellowstone, which had once been the place of their imaginary journey, forever preserving only the echoes of this crime, which became the price for the right to a quiet, uncontrolled life.